Good evening. We can measure our own spiritual progress, and we can measure it by a very simple sign. It is not how beautifully we can speak of truth, nor how noble our resolutions sound, nor how determined our will appears to be. It is how steadily, how frequently, how naturally we remember the indwelling presence. When you stop to think of spiritual life as something to be attained, something to be achieved by the personal mind, you have already missed the mark. You are not meant to become Christ by effort. You are forgetting that the Christ is the life of your own being now, and the very strain you feel is the evidence of the forgetting. Now, let me illustrate that. You begin the day, perhaps, with the thought of God. It isn't too difficult to have a few minutes of quiet and to feel uplifted. The difficult thing begins an hour later. Watch yourself then. Watch what happens when the telephone rings, when the schedule crowds you, when a memory of yesterday's failure intrudes, when ambition stirs or self-condemnation whispers. You will find the mind scurrying into tomorrow's plans, nursing yesterday's injuries, measuring itself against others, fearing a lack of time, of money, of health, of love. That return is not moral sin. Don't call it that. It is the symptom of absence, an absence of conscious contact. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Where the Spirit of the Lord isn't, there is anxiety, there is pressure, there is the mortal sense. Again, notice the paradox. The harder you try to make the human self holy, the more you bear witness to the belief that you and God are two. That Christ is somewhere to be gained instead of recognized as the eye of your being. Never forget that. The practice, the very heart of our work, is not self-improvement. It is remembrance. Practicing the presence is the measuring rod. By the degree of one's success in remembering, today, tomorrow, for brief periods and then longer, you will know the rate of your spiritual progress. Do not allow the old yardstick of accomplishment to deceive you. We are not here to varnish the natural man. We are to awaken to the spirit that already indwells. Now, I want you to expect a certain order this hour. We will not leave you with inspiration only. We will move from doctrine to illustration to practice, and then to proofs. Not theoretical proofs, but evidences, what in modern language have been called demonstrations. As these evidences accumulate, you will see that harmony appears not because you have perfected yourself, but because a contact is established. Discord fades not by argument, but by presence. It is as direct as that. So begin, even tonight, with this simple measure. Watch the day, and note how quickly the mind returns to anxious planning, to ambition, to self-blame. Do not fight the return. Simply mark it as the signal to remember. Acknowledge, even for a breath, that the life within you is God. That Christ in you is your sufficiency in all things. That acknowledgement will be our line of march. It is not a climb to God. It is a turn, a remembrance. And peace follows the turn like shadow follows light. Acquaint now thyself with Him, and be at peace. Now, let us face plainly what most of us have called spirituality. It has been the exhausting project of becoming, trying to polish a personal self, disciplining traits, arranging virtues as if they were medals to be earned, collecting sacred habits and noble thoughts as if somewhere, somehow, God were distant, and we must climb toward Him on a ladder of improvements. When you stop to think of it, that whole program rests on one hidden premise, that you are apart from the Christ and must acquire Him. The very chase is the confession of absence. The pursuit bears witness to separation. That is why it tires you. That is why it never concludes. Now let me illustrate that. A man sets his jaw in January and says, "This year I will be more loving, more patient, more generous." For a week he can appear so. He watches his words. He holds back his temper. He writes checks. But inside there is the strain of a swimmer holding a breath. Then one afternoon traffic crowds him, or a word wounds his pride, or a bill arrives and pinches his sense of supply, and he explodes. And with the explosion comes guilt. I have failed again. And with guilt comes comparison. Others do this better. And with comparison comes a subtle spiritual pride. At least I'm trying harder than they are. And then despair. Perhaps I am not fit for this life. Do you see the circle? The mind has turned the holy into achievement and failure, and the soul sits weary under a scoreboard that God never installed. Again, when you stop to think of it, what is it that is actually trying? Is it the life of God within you, straining to be loving? Is it the Christ laboring to be Christ-like? Or is it the human mind, the personal sense, seeking control, seeking approval, seeking safety? After enough years of it, you see so much of it that you know definitely. The struggler is the mind, attempting to earn what only presence bestows. And because the mind cannot bestow it, it swings between pride and shame, between I am doing well and I am lost. And both are the same bondage. Now let us be honest. If God were truly present in our consciousness, if the Christ were acknowledged as the I of our own being, would the same fear and pressure dominate the day? Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Where the Spirit of the Lord isn't, there is the project of becoming. That project is the evidence of absence. Never forget that. The more feverishly you attempt to become spiritual, the more you proclaim to yourself and to your world, I am not yet. And that proclamation roots itself in your nerves, in your finances, in your home. And it breeds tension because you are arguing against your own nature. Don't allow that argument to go on unchallenged. The bondage is not that you lack some moral polish. The bondage is the belief in separation. Quiet, respectable, religious perhaps, but separation all the same. The strain to become is the mask that separation wears. As soon as you recognize that, you can stop climbing and begin acknowledging. You can let the shoulders drop, the breath return, and in that little space confess, I am not a person trying to get to God. I am the life of God expressing itself as this I. And even before any trait softens, you will find the pressure ease. Not because you have improved the natural man, but because, for a moment, presence has been remembered. Now we come to the heart of the framework. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Where the Spirit of the Lord isn't, where it is not consciously realized, there is mortality. Do not make that mystical or vague. Mortality means the human scene as we know it when God is only a word. Sin that repeats, disease that frightens, death that terrifies, lack that humiliates, accidents that shock, loneliness that gnaws. When you stop to think of it, these are not punishments sent by a father. These are the evidences that, in that moment, there is little or no God presence or God power in our awareness. Never forget that. Now, let me illustrate the moral logic, because if you don't see this, you will carry a hidden grievance against God. If God were actively present in the discord itself, if the very mind that is love were producing your fear, your pain, your failure, you would be in the horrible position of blaming God for your ills. You would be forced to conclude that God both wounds and heals, both starves and feeds, both condemns and forgives. That is moral chaos. Therefore, we must accept what experience has shown again and again. The issue is not God's unwillingness. The issue is our lack of conscious contact. As soon as a contact with God is established, harmony begins to reappear. After enough years of watching it, you know definitely that this is the law of your being. Again, do not take this as condemnation of persons. This is not bad people being punished. This is a diagnosis of a state of consciousness. Scripture calls it the natural man. Man living by the reports of the senses, by fear's suggestions, by memory and opinion, without the felt government of spirit. In that state, we reason and will and struggle. We attempt pious solutions and moral exertions, and for a day we seem to hold the tide. Then the tide returns. Why? Because mind, however determined, cannot bestow what only presence is. The mind can imitate virtue. It cannot impart life. Now, let me illustrate that simply. A woman sits with a diagnosis that chills her. She prays hard, she quotes verses, she bargains, and the fear remains close, breathing. One day, perhaps by weariness, perhaps by grace, she stops bargaining and becomes still. She remembers, not as a sentence but as a fact, I live, yet not I. The life that lives me is God. In that instant, the pressure in the chest releases, the mind quiets, and a different intelligence begins to govern. It may lead her to a physician. It may lead her to rest. It may lead her to change nothing outwardly at all. But the panic is broken. The same law works in finance, in home, in relationships. As soon as contact is established, even briefly, order begins to disclose itself in mind, in body, and in affairs. This is our hope, and it is a sober hope with a condition. Do not expect harmony while remaining in absence. Do not expect liberty while rehearsing fear and planning control. Establish contact. Even for a breath, acknowledge the indwelling presence. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Where the Spirit of the Lord isn't, there is mortality. Discord is the evidence of absence. Harmony is the fruit of presence realized. Acquaint now thyself with him, and be at peace. Now Paul draws a dividing line, and he does it without apology. The natural man receiveth not the things of the Spirit of God. They are foolishness unto him. Neither can he know them, because they are spiritually discerned. When you stop to think of it, that is not a slap at intelligence. It is a description of the instrument we have been using. The natural man means the sense-ruled mind, the mind that insists on seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, or smelling before it will grant reality. And spirit cannot be forced onto that measuring stick. Spirit is not an object among objects. Therefore, to the natural man, it seems impractical, vague, sentimental, or at best, a noble ideal for Sundays. Now let me illustrate that. You hear that God is your supply. The mind at once looks to the bank balance and the ledger and says, prove it there. You hear that God is your life and health. The mind at once consults the thermometer, the scan, the symptom, and says, show me. You hear that love governs your home. The mind glances at yesterday's argument and decides, not yet. Do you see? The natural man, trying to serve you, tries to protect you by asking for sensory evidence. It is not evil. It is merely unqualified to judge spirit, and therefore it turns away from the very help you seek. As long as you confer reality only where eyes can see and hands can handle, spirit remains to you impractical. Not in truth, only in your experience. Again, Paul will not leave us with a negation. He says, ye are not in the flesh, but in the Spirit, if so be that the Spirit of God dwell in you. Now if any man have not the Spirit of Christ, he is none of his. And again, Christ in you, the hope of glory. Never forget that. The Christ is not a future attainment, not a moral ladder to climb. The Christ is the indwelling life of your own being when the Spirit of God dwells in you consciously. The difference is not geographical, it is awareness. Where the Spirit of the Lord is realized, there is liberty. Where the Spirit of the Lord isn't realized, there is the natural man, the best that unaided mind and senses can manage. Do not relegate these words to history. Do not imagine that Paul addressed only apostles and saints as if your house, your office, your body were outside the circle of Scripture. He writes to consciousness. He writes to ye, you. Know ye not that ye are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwelleth in you? Believe that now, not as flattery, as diagnosis. The temple is not a stone church. The temple is this inner awareness in which God may be consciously contacted. When you read Christ in you, read it as present tense, as your own I recognized, not as an honorary plaque on a wall of saints. Now this divides our way forward. If the mind as mind cannot interpret spirit, if it requires that other faculty Paul calls spiritual discernment, then we must cease flogging the intellect to produce what it cannot. Don't allow the mind to sit on God's bench and demand sensorial proofs of what transcends the senses. Instead, we will learn the faculty by which Christ is recognized, an inward awareness awakened in stillness, a capacity to know without seeing, to be assured without arguing. That is where we turn next, because only by that practice does the indwelling become more than doctrine. It becomes the very presence that governs mind and body and restores harmony. Now, if we accept Paul's line, then we must accept this principle without compromise. It requires a different faculty than the faculty of the human mind. The mind itself, being finite, cannot embrace infinity. Therefore, it cannot take hold of God by the very instruments it uses for arithmetic, calendar, and contracts. When you stop to think of it, that is neither insult nor mystery. It is simple fitness of instrument. The eye is not unworthy because it cannot hear music. It is simply the wrong instrument for symphony. So with mind. It is a fine servant for figures and forms, for schedules, for adding and subtracting, for remembering a friend's address. But when you ask it to produce God, to produce Christ, it stands there honestly and says, I do not know how. Now, let me illustrate that. Not long ago, a very learned professor, highly honored, well-read, a man whose name is quoted, was discovered to have what the physicians called incurable disease. He wrote a sober piece for a newspaper. He said, in so many words, I have examined life and death. I can find no reason to expect anything beyond the annihilation of consciousness. Do you see what happened? Education did not fail him. It carried him right to the edge of its province and then could not go on. Confined to the mind and its senses, he could only measure what can be seen, heard, tasted, touched, or smelled. And since God is not an object among objects, the mind concluded, honestly to itself, there is nothing there. That is not wickedness, it is limitation. It requires a different faculty. Again, you will see parallels wherever real creativity has appeared. The inventors you honor did not reason their greatest moments into being. Edison, the wizard at General Electric, spoke of ideas that came in flashes while he was resting from problem solving. Mathematicians confess that the proof arrives as a whole before the steps arrange themselves. Composers hear the music and then copy it down. They do not build it by arithmetic. Artists see a finished canvas inwardly and then approach the easel. In all of these, they must touch a source of inspiration within themselves that is not the plodding mind. They reach, briefly, beyond intellect, into an intuitional center, and from there they return with what becomes practical, testable, audible. So it is in this life of the Spirit. If the mind cannot create Christ, then all our trying to become Christ is misdirected effort. Don't allow the mind to sit on God's bench, processing verses and arranging emotions, and then demand a result from its own machinery. Recognition does not occur by striving. Recognition occurs by stillness, by receptivity, by a listening that is interior and gentle. The faculty awakens when you withdraw, even for a minute, from opinion, memory, fear, planning, and you allow the word I to be present without definition. Not the I of personality, not the history-laden I, but the I that is life itself. In that quiet, you will not see, hear, taste, touch, or smell anything new. Yet you may know, without argument, that something is here which the mind did not supply. It isn't too difficult to feel a little of this in a quiet moment. The difficult thing begins an hour later, when the noise of the day insists that only what it can count is real. Then the old instruments claim the throne. They say, "Let us figure it out. Let us defend. Let us hurry." In that hour, do not struggle. Establish contact. Step back inside yourself as if you were sitting higher than your own head, and softly, without words if you can, acknowledge, I. Let that acknowledgement be the turn of your face toward the presence. Remember, mind is your servant. Your mind is yours. You govern that mind. You can refuse to let it drag you into its courtroom. You can, in 5 seconds, return to the inner faculty that recognizes what the mind cannot achieve. And with that recognition, brief, imperfect, repeated, the presence begins to govern, and the day finds a different order. Where the Spirit of the Lord is realized, there is liberty. Where it isn't, there is the old treadmill. Choose, again and again, the stillness in which I announces itself. Now we come to the pivot, without which all our practice collapses into technique. The Master spoke of something he called I. Not the personal I who boasts and fears, but the I that says, I and my Father are one. That I is life, and life itself is God. When you stop to think of it, that must be so, for there is not a second life somewhere else sustaining you while God remains an observer. The life by which you live, breathing, knowing, being, is the presence. Never forget that. Now let me illustrate how identity misplacement creates bondage. We say, I am tired, and immediately submit identity to the report of nerves. Or, I am anxious, and enthrone a surge of thought as governor. In that instant, the body and the mind become masters, and you, the I, become the vassal. From that reversal comes appetite driving decisions, fatigue dictating schedule, fear choreographing speech. When the body is treated as life, life is jerked by the body. When the mind is treated as self, self is tossed by thought. Don't allow that. Again, correct the ownership at the root. I have a body. I have a mind. This body is mine to steward, not my identity. This mind is mine to use, not my ruler. You govern that mind. You direct that body. You, the I, are the indwelling life that animates, instructs, and maintains order. And that life is God expressing as your being. As soon as you take your rightful seat, order begins. The pulse slows, breath evens, a quiet authority appears, and you find that sensations and thoughts can be observed, addressed, and guided, because they are not you. Now, when you bring this into spirituality, you will see why the project of becoming fails. The self that tries to improve itself is usually the mind attempting to perfect the mind. It edits words, rearranges habits, scolds itself into decorum, and for a week plays saint. Then the old current drags it back. Why? Because the usurper is still on the throne. The way is not to make a better mind-governed person. The way is to stand as I and let I govern mind and body. Stand first, govern next. Recognition precedes reform. Now let me make this practical. When a thought of fear parades through your awareness, with drum and flag declaring, "Law, emergency," do not salute it. Say within yourself, quietly, "I." Then from that seat, address the thought. You are not law. You are a suggestion. Mind, be still. When fatigue claims, "I cannot go on," answer as owner, not victim. Body, rest now or move now as directed, but you do not dictate my being. Life governs you. Where the Spirit of the Lord is realized, there is liberty. Where it isn't realized, reports masquerade as rulers. Never forget that you do not have to be the victim of your mind. Do not allow thoughts to parade as law in your consciousness. Do not allow sensations to declare identity. Acquaint yourself again and again with I, life as your very being, and let that I take its rightful government. From this relocation of identity, reform comes without strain, energy without panic, wisdom without argument. The awakening is not self-improvement, it is identity reclaimed. I, the life of God within, governs mind and body, and harmony follows governance as surely as light dissolves shadow. Now we must speak of how this becomes provable to you, not as theory, but as life. At first it is faith. It still is in the realm of faith. You hear, "Christ in you, the hope of glory," and something within assents. You believe the testimonies. You find your heart warmed by Scripture, and you resolve to remember. Beautiful, sincere, but still belief. Then, as practice begins, just a few honest moments of turning within each day, evidences appear. In modern language, they have been called demonstrations. And as these evidences begin to pile up, your convictions deepen, until what you held by faith becomes something sturdier than opinion. Now let me illustrate that, because unless you can recognize evidence when it comes, you will miss your own harvest. You face a fear at midnight. The mind has argued for hours. You stop, turn within, and simply acknowledge, I. In 2 minutes, the chest loosens, the argument loses its teeth, and sleep returns. That is evidence. You have a pain that has bullied you through the afternoon. You withdraw into quiet, make no bargain, make no outline, and feel a soft release. The body calms. That is evidence. A relationship that is lived on complaint softens the very day you cease rehearsing speeches and sit in silent recognition. An apology appears that you did not script. Supply arrives, a check, a new avenue, a small remission of pressure, after you drop frantic calculations and establish contact. Guidance reaches you as a wordless rightness. You simply know to call here, to rest there, to wait without anxiety. These are not tricks of positive thinking, not manipulations of matter by mind. They are the fruit of presence realized. After enough years of watching this, in your life and in others, you know definitely. As soon as contact with God is established, harmony begins to be restored. Again, understand the point of evidence. It is not to build spiritual vanity. Don't allow the mind to seize the flower and pin it to its own lapel. Evidences are to train trust, not in mental effort, not in formulas, but in the indwelling presence. The mind will whisper, "My method worked." Stop to think of that. Did anxiety produce peace? Did willpower produce release? Or did peace come when you ceased outlining and rested in I? Let every demonstration bend your confidence away from the personal and anchor it in presence, so that pride does not throw you back under the law of the natural man. Now, the great difference in the mature life is this. Contact becomes repeatable, not accidental. If remembrance is occasional, you will keep beginning again at every crisis. The difficult thing, as I have told you, begins an hour later, when noise resumes, when deadlines bark, when memory replays yesterday's injury. That is precisely why we must establish a rhythm by which remembrance returns many times a day until it is the background music of consciousness. Then faith no longer trembles between belief and doubt. Evidences no longer seem rare mercies. Remembrance becomes a steady current, and evidence becomes frequent enough to be called normal. And then, one bright day or one bright night, the very presence announces itself. Not a result, not a relief only, but direct knowing. No argument, no outline, just I. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. As remembrance matures through evidence into knowing, liberty ceases to be an episode. It becomes the atmosphere in which you live and move and have your being. Acquaint now thyself with him, and keep acquainting, until the acquaintance is so near that you cannot forget if you try. Now we end the project of becoming by putting a frame around our day that does not permit absence to take the throne. It must be measurable, not aspirational. Devote the first 10 or 15 minutes of the day to conscious recognition. Before news, before plans, before the world's hypnosis. Sit up, not to drift, but to acknowledge. No petition, no bargaining. Simply, quietly, I. Or if words are needed, Father, thou art here. I and my Father are one. Life in me is God. Let the mind bring no agenda. Let the heart bring no complaint. Just recognition. This is not long. It is first. It isn't too difficult to feel a little of this before the day begins. The difficult thing begins an hour later. Now, to make it practical and provable, set an hourly reminder at first. A chime, a mark on your schedule, something simple. Not to strain you, to wake you. When it sounds, do not make a production. Do not preach to yourself. Stop for 10 seconds, for 30 if you can, and acknowledge within. Christ within. The presence is here. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Then return to what is at hand. In an office, at a sink, in a car park, anywhere. These brief acknowledgments are not for fixing. They are for remembering. Acknowledge him in all thy ways, and he shall direct thy paths. You will be surprised how often the path becomes clear after a 10-second turning. Now, name the failure point with compassion. The mind resumes personal responsibility, personal fear, personal ambition. It will say, I must improve myself. I must make it happen. I must defend. Don't allow that to shame you. Don't fight the thought. Replace it. Replace striving with remembrance. Say within, the source is already established within. I do not add God to this moment. I recognize God already here. If you catch yourself drafting speeches to become better, quietly return to I. If you feel the old push of proving yourself, return to I. You govern that mind. You can end the argument by turning on the light. You do not have to wrestle the shadows. Now close the day rightly. Do not retire to sleep without acknowledgement. Let the last consciousness be God contact, not the day's narratives. Turn from the news, from the replay of conversations, from the ledger of wins and losses. Settle, and within, again, simply, I. Or, Thou art with me. Let the sense of presence be the seal upon the day. If words come, let them be assurances, not arguments. I will never leave you nor forsake you. I go before thee to make the crooked places straight. Then rest. You will find that sleep held in presence renews more deeply than sleep held in worry, and the night itself becomes a sacrament of guidance. This is how we end becoming, by a rhythm that refuses absence. Morning recognition, hourly remembrance, the before-sleep seal. Not many words, contact. Not pressure, presence. Never forget that you are not making God come. You are consenting to what already is. Begin tomorrow morning. Mark the hours. Close the night. And watch how harmony, quietly, normally, begins to govern your day. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Acquaint now thyself with Him, and be at peace. Now we must bring this down into the hours that scream. When the body reports pain, when the figures do not meet, when the home flares, when guilt walks in like a stern judge, these are not times to strive harder. These are the moments to remember deeper. Don't allow the pressure to recruit you back into the old project of becoming. Don't allow the mind to say, now is the time for more force, more argument, more heroic will. No. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Where the Spirit of the Lord isn't, there is mortality. In pressure, establish contact, not drama. Now, let me illustrate the two roads. The first is willpower. The symptom appears, and the mind clenches. It argues with the sensation, rehearses a dozen explanations, patrols the internet, and tightens the body another notch. The bill arrives, and the mind goes to war with arithmetic, scolding and pleading and forecasting catastrophe. A quarrel breaks open, and you craft speeches, defend positions, accumulate evidence like a lawyer. Guilt rises, and the self-condemnation grows eloquent. All of this, noted, intensifies the sense of a second power arrayed against you. Willpower tightens. It argues with appearances, and, by that argument, grants them authority. The second road is presence contact. The report comes, and you pause. Withdraw consent from the appearance as final law. Not denial of facts, withdraw their jurisdiction over your being. Turn within and acknowledge, even if only in a whisper, I. Christ within, only law, only life, only substance, only cause. There is no power apart from God. Let that be your first act. Make no outline. Do not dramatize. Be still and know. In that stillness, something loosens. the inner atmosphere changes. You have changed governments. Now do not expect fireworks for proof. Expect the first sign, quieting. Expect the argument to drop its volume. Expect a right action to present itself, not as panic, but as a simple next step. It may be to rest the body or to seek help. It may be to make a call or to refrain from a call. It may be to say, "Forgive me," or to say nothing at all. It will come as a fitness, a peace-accompanied directive. Follow that. The presence will govern the situation more wisely than your anxiety ever could. Remember, this is government, not optimism. In realized presence, there is no sin standing as law, no disease standing as life, no death standing as end, no accident standing as cause, no poverty standing as substance. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Where the Spirit of the Lord is realized, appearances lose their authority, because they have no power apart from God. Never forget that. So when the day screams, refuse the theater. Establish contact. Acknowledge the indwelling Christ as the only governing power of this moment. You govern that mind. Mind, be still. You address that body. Life governs you. You stand in I, and you will find, again and again, that harmony begins not with your push, but with presence realized, and the situation under that government orders itself in a way you could not have managed by might or by argument. Now, for a few moments, let us meditate, not to gain something, not to demand a result, but to recognize what is already established. We are not adding God to this room. We are consenting to presence already here. Quiet yourself. No strain, no plan, just a gentle willingness. Sit as you are and imagine, only imagine, that you are seated a little above the mind's noise, as if you were way up here, looking down kindly at thoughts passing like traffic. Let them come, let them go, without permission or protest. You are not the traffic. You are the witness, the eye that observes. If a concern steps forward, nod and let it pass. You govern that mind. You do not argue with it. You simply take your rightful seat above it. Now, begin with the word I. Softly, gently. Not as a thought you push, but as if you were hearing an I come up within you, speaking itself. I. Then a breath. Again, I. Let the syllable be a door, not a slogan. This is not the I of personality, not the I of history. This is the I of your being, the life that is one with its source. I. Rest. I. Let each repetition settle you further into the seat of quiet authority. Now, allow Scripture to speak not as a quotation, but as present assurance heard inwardly, as if the presence itself were voicing itself in you. Be still and know that I am God. I will never leave you nor forsake you. I go before thee to make the crooked places straight. Neither do I condemn thee. Do not recite, receive. Let these words arrive of their own accord, warm and near, as if you are hearing what has always been true. Listen in the silence that follows. Do not outline what this must do. Do not bargain. Just rest. If warmth comes, let it come. If peace appears, consent to it. If there is only a sense of rightness without words, that is enough. Notice the shoulders easing, the breath finding its own rhythm, the edge coming off the argument. If the mind proposes a project, return once more, softly. I. Where the Spirit of the Lord is realized, there is liberty. We will seal this now. Quiet gratitude, without excitement. Thank you. The Christ is within, functioning, governing, revealing. I and my Father are one. I do not take this presence in and out. It abides. It goes before me into the next hour, into the next task. I acknowledge it, and I will remember. Gently, let a simple thank you close the door. Not as finality, but as seal. When you open your eyes, do not rush. Carry this awareness as you would carry a lighted candle in still air. Steady, unforced. And through the day, when you stop to think of it, hear again that inner word. I. Now let us speak of growth in a way that will not send you back into the treadmill of becoming. Growth is not a climb to higher rungs, not a collection of spiritual trophies, not a gallery of unusual experiences. Growth is simply this: fewer forgettings and quicker returns. That is all. The measure is not how high a state you can reach in a retreat. The measure is how swiftly, in the common hour, you turn again to recognition when you notice you have wandered. Spiritual progress is the shortening of the interval between forgetting and remembrance. Now, let me make that plain and measurable, because otherwise you will not know where you stand, and the mind will invent a project for you. Watch the durations. How long does fear run before you reestablish contact? Last year, it ran 3 days. This month, 3 hours. Now, 30 minutes. Soon, 3 minutes. How long does resentment hold the microphone before you retire it to silence? Watch the rehearsal habit, the staging of conversations you will never have, the brilliant speeches you deliver to the empty room. Fewer hours are lost there, fewer minutes. And in place of those durations, you will see other signs, more spontaneous peace without arranging it, more right timing, not hurrying, not missing, more gentleness that is not weakness, more firmness that is not anger. You will notice that you speak less when silence is truer, and you speak more when love requires it, without the old tremor. These are evidences of remembrance taking its rightful place as the atmosphere. Again, normalize the human condition so that you may persevere without drama. Forgetting is not failure. Forgetting is the old habit of absence. The victory is the return, without self-punishment. Don't allow the mind to scold you for noticing you forgot. That very noticing is grace at work. The moment you discover you have wandered, do not bargain, do not explain. Turn. Softly, I. Acknowledge. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Never forget that the presence is not intermittent. Only our awareness is intermittent. God does not come and go. We come and go in attention. Therefore, do not beg God to come. Acknowledge God is here. Now, make this a practice of honest accounting. Once or twice in the day, stop to think of it and ask, what was my interval today? How quickly did I return after the phone call rattled me, after the pain reported, after the criticism? If it took an hour yesterday and half an hour today, rejoice quietly. If you fell into the old rehearsal for an afternoon, but this time remembered before sleep and sealed the day in peace, count that as growth. It isn't too difficult to feel a little of this now. The difficult thing begins an hour later. But even then, the way remains the same. Return and return again, not to an idea, but to I. In time, with this humble arithmetic of intervals, remembrance ceases to be an event and becomes the background of consciousness. You will find that you wake already turned, move already aware, decide already under government, and when you forget, you return as naturally as drawing the next breath. Acknowledge him in all thy ways, and he shall direct thy paths. Acquaint now thyself with him, and be at peace. Our work is to practice until this remembrance becomes the very air of our being. Then, the Christ is not something you practice. The Christ is the life you are living. Where the Spirit of the Lord is realized, there is liberty. And that liberty becomes normal. Now we come to the plain word that sends you out of this room equipped and quiet. We have seen that suffering is not proof of God's will. It is the evidence of absence, an absence of conscious contact. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Where the Spirit of the Lord isn't, there is mortality. We have learned that Christ is not afar off to be attained. Christ is within you as the very life of your being. The mind cannot achieve this by its own devices. It requires a different faculty awakened in stillness. Recognition, not effort, reveals what has been present all along. And as soon as contact with God is established, harmony begins to be restored. You have watched evidences. You have tasted the quieting. You have known the return after forgetting. Now the word is simple. Stop becoming. Start recognizing. And let the Christ be lived. Now, here is your commission. For the next 30 days, put a frame around your day and do not break it. Begin with morning recognition, 10 or 15 minutes before anything else. No petition, no plan, only the quiet acknowledgement, I and my Father are one. Through the day, make it hourly. A brief stop, 10 seconds, 30. Father, thou art here. Christ within. Only law, only life. Then, before sleep, seal the day in the same recognition. Do not force a result. Do not outline a change. Do this for 30 days and watch what changes without your pushing. Watch what quiet authority enters your speech, what right timing arrives, what fears lose their voice, what doors open because presence went before you. Now do not allow the mind to steal this and turn it into another achievement program. The moment you feel strain, drop the program and return to remembrance. This is not about eloquent words or long hours. It isn't too difficult to begin. The difficult thing begins an hour later. Then, simply return. Count not experiences, count returns. Don't allow the mind to boast when something shifts. Don't allow it to accuse when nothing appears to move. Your task is not to move outer pieces. Your task is to keep contact. You govern that mind. Be still. You address that body. Life governs you. You stand as I, and government, not willpower, does the work. And now carry this into the common hour. In the meeting, in the kitchen, in the traffic, in the hospital corridor. Acknowledge him in all thy ways, and he shall direct thy paths. Let the day be your proving ground of quiet dominion. When fear speaks, you will know what to do. Return. When pain argues, you will know what to do. Return. When lack threatens, you will know what to do. Return. Fewer forgettings, quicker returns. That is growth. That is freedom. That is Christ lived. We will leave you then under benediction, not instruction. Hear it within, as if rising from the center of your own being. Be still and know that I am God. I will never leave you nor forsake you. I go before thee to make the crooked places straight. Fear not, it is I. Neither do I condemn thee. My peace I give unto you. Let these assurances walk ahead of you into the next hour and the next. Rest and remember. Stop becoming. Recognize. And let the Christ be lived as your very life. Thank you.